A few months ago, I listened to the Diary of a CEO podcast episode with Marissa Peer. In this episode, Steve mentions Marissa's book called I Am Enough. After reading the book, I thought it'd be interesting to cover on this channel. So today, we're going to be covering the 3 best concepts from this book in regards to how we can improve our relationship with ourselves and with other people. One of the first pieces of advice that Marissa mentions in this book is related to familiarity, specifically in regards to relationships. This could relate to friendships or with romantic partners, but I think what Marissa is mentioning or referring to without actually saying it explicitly is attachment theory. Attachment theory is one of the most well accepted models in psychology or concepts in psychology, and it states that, in short, that we have a desire to form a bond with our parent or caregiver in the early years of our life, whereby the way we were treated in our infant years relates to the traits and behaviours we look for when looking for friendships or when we look for romantic partners in the future. So, without going into too much detail, the theory suggests that if we had a traumatic childhood, then we are more likely to look for partners that are maybe more toxic, assuming the trauma is in relation to our parents. So this is what Marissa is referring to when she mentions familiarity, in the sense that just because something feels familiar or just because you have an affinity towards a certain way that someone treats you, maybe in a romantic way, doesn't mean that that's necessarily the right way you should be treated. Based on my experience, there's a 4-step process that I want to suggest that people can use as a thought exercise around this area. The first step is to question what kind of people we've had friendships or relationships with in the past. The second is to think about whether these relationships, or one of them or any of them, were healthy or unhealthy. The third step is what kind of traits did the person have that was unhealthy, assuming the relationship was unhealthy, and then what was our reasoning for accepting this person into our lives. So, for example, if you were in a relationship whereby someone was abusive towards you, this could be physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, it's to question, well, why did I accept that? For example, some people allow this because maybe they have low self-esteem. The final step is thinking, here's, this person had this unsavory or unhealthy trait. I accepted them in my life because of this belief that I have. Where did that belief come from? Why do I have low self-esteem? Why do I go for partners that are unhealthy? So now you can see that, but in a step-by-step manner, we are relating our relationships to our previous experiences. As a quick caveat though, based on my read of the psychological literature, and again, I'm not a psychologist, but based on my read of the literature, it's still possible to have these unhealthy desires for certain traits and behaviours and relationships, even if you had a very stable childhood, and even if you had a good relationship with your parents. For example, if someone had a very abusive relationship when they were maybe 15 or 16 years old, they can still learn or become familiar with this kind of behavior in future relationships. What I've just talked about is the self-awareness side of the equation. The other side is what you then do about it once you realize these things. If you want me to make a video on that in the future, feel free to let me know. As a disclaimer, a lot of what I'm saying comes from my personal experience. There were times when I would pursue people or relationships that were unhealthy, and I didn't have the confidence to actually stick up for myself. And it was only until I realized that this was the case and that I discovered where that came from that I could actually start to do something about it. As well as the traits we look for romantically, our life experiences also affect how we treat other people. Marissa mentions in her book that abuse and rejection can manifest into, negative traits later on in life. These traits could be a fear of intimacy, an inflated ego, addictions, or the feeling that you are inadequate to some degree. Another way of thinking about this is, what were the needs of your childhood that you think were unmet, and how does that relate to your needs as an adult? For example, if you grew up with parents that never really supported you and your interests, maybe they even called you stupid, okay? That might lead you to have an insecurity about your intelligence, and so therefore you feel the need to try and prove how smart you are. A big mistake that I see people make in this situation is that they try and treat the symptoms rather than addressing the root cause. So relating this to the example that I just made, someone might try and be as smart as they can rather than addressing why they may feel inadequate in regards to their intelligence. Another example is someone who feels very anxious a lot might try to self-medicate with alcohol. Or someone that can't be alone without feeling lonely or needs validation might jump from relationship to relationship. Now, I can appreciate I'm making loads of generalizations here, but hopefully you can kind of see some kind of patterns here that you've picked up from other people, or maybe even yourself in your own life. Because Lord knows I've been guilty of some of this stuff in the past myself. So regarding the strategy I mentioned before, try and build up the self-awareness to monitor your own thoughts and feelings in real time, find the root cause for what your unhealthy desires might be, and try and solve them or treat them in a mature and healthy way. Even though what I'm describing is something that anyone can do, many people don't do this. Personally, I find that they either don't have the self-awareness to realize these things in the first place, or they don't do it even if they are aware of what's going on, because they don't want to face the memories and fears that are the root cause of these desires, because it feels really uncomfortable. I'm going to give a little secret here. Almost everyone finds this uncomfortable or challenging to some degree. It is incredibly difficult to let yourself feel whatever emotion you're trying to bury down inside you, especially if those emotions relate to traumatic experiences. It is really difficult to change your thought patterns and beliefs, and that's why many people don't do it. However, with effort, over time, it is possible to change your thought patterns and beliefs to ones that are more healthy and ones that will serve you. To give a really silly analogy, let's say your consciousness, your brain, your thought patterns, however you want to word it, is like a garden or someone's backyard. The greenness and health of the grass represents your mental health, and each leaf on the lawn or garden represents a belief or thought or mental pattern that is unhealthy, or just isn't useful for you. If you are very unfortunate, you might have piles of wet, soggy leaves all over the garden, whereby you have to remove them with some chopsticks. This is the mind that many people live with, and they feel like they're drowning in risk, responsibilities, stress, flaws, and just anything else. However, over time, with a lot of work, it's possible to get to the point where there's only a few singular leaves scattered here and there, and instead of chopsticks, you've got a leaf blower. Obviously, what I'm describing is kind of like each end of the continuum, and there's been times in my life where I've looked at my garden, so to speak, on my mental health, and I've thought, you know what, it's looking pretty green, there's only like a couple of leaves scattered here and there. And I turn my back for 1 second, and when I look back around, there's piles of leaves everywhere. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't realize I had this insecurity, or I didn't realize I believed this or had this thought pattern. Again, this is just a really silly example, but it's to show that even though I've made loads of progress in my own life with regards to my mental health and the lens in which I use to see the world, there are still times that I fall into downward spirals and that I have unhealthy thought patterns that don't serve me. In life, we are a process. We're not a thing that stays stagnant. But that is one of actually the gifts of life, because it means it's more about the journey than the destination. And it means that we always have something to actively work on. Unsurprisingly, a lot of what I've said in this video and a lot of what Marissa mentions in the book relates to our experiences in our childhood. And that isn't really surprising, because when you're a child, your brains are like sponges in regards to learning stuff. The term neuroplasticity, which is basically the brain and the nervous system's ability to respond and change to experience and stimuli. This ability, neuroplasticity, is very strong in children. So based on that, it would make sense that our childhood experiences affect almost every aspect of our life and our persona as we get older. I think this knowledge and the awareness of this information actually enables us to have more compassion towards people who have unhealthy traits themselves. Because no matter what kind of traits that they have, no one chose the family that they were brought up with. No one chose the kind of traumatic experiences they had as children. Everyone was once that little boy or girl that was upset or scared or lonely. At least this is what I try to think about when I'm faced with someone who is a bit of an unsavory character and I feel like I want to respond in a unproductive and emotional way. For those of you that aren't aware, delayed gratification is when we kind of skip out on immediate gratification, for example eating sweets, in favour for working on more long-term goals where we get the rewards later on, such as being healthy, with exercising or eating clean. A big part of one's mental health is delayed gratification, and Marissa mentions in her book that a big part of why delayed gratification feels really good is because we know we've worked really hard to achieve it. An interesting point that Marissa mentions in her book is that one of the reasons why children from wealthy families often don't succeed or feel fulfilled is because they're expected to carry on the family business. While this might sound kind of silly because the parents are removing risk, they're literally offering a safety net for the children, it prevents the child from having the gratification of building something themselves. I think many people want to achieve so many things in life, but they want the achievement without the work that needs to be put into it. As I've gotten older, I've realised that delayed gratification feels better, and the act of putting effort into something makes it so much sweeter when you actually achieve it in the end. Yes, you might have had advantages or disadvantages, but you know that the trials and tribulations you went through, you did yourself. And if these enabled you to be a better person or to achieve certain things, this is something that you should be proud of. And from my experience, the more one achieves in their life, the more confident and secure they feel about themselves. But unfortunately, many people never complete or even start the projects that they want to partly because of how modern society is set up. To elaborate on this, Naval Ravikant mentions that for the majority of human history, we have had diseases of scarcity, of constantly living in a world where there isn't enough resources to meet our needs. Hence why our brains have a scarcity mindset with many things, and when we see something that we like, we have a desire to indulge in it straight away. However, society is evolving faster than our brains can, and now we live in a world where we have diseases of abundance. There's too much addictive stuff, assuming you live in more developed countries, obviously. Society has taken sugar and weaponized it, causing us to have loads of health complications, so we can't stop eating the sugar. Society has taken advantage of our desire to reproduce, making pornography, so this zaps our motivation and libido. Society has taken the need for social acceptance from our tribe and has made social media like TikTok and Instagram so we can never put our phones down. Society has taken advantage of our need to progress in life or our desire to progress in life by making video games, which again zaps our motivation. No matter where you turn, we are being overstimulated by society. We are being drowned in cheap dopamine to the point where we are deeply unhappy unless we are plugged into the metaverse. For anyone trying to escape the matrix or the rat race or however you word it, you are fighting against some of the smartest statisticians and scientists who are making these things as addictive as possible. So no wonder that people struggle to make positive change in their lives, because there's so many addictive things to self-medicate with that have been scientifically designed to trigger all your dopamine. However, as I have removed these habits from my life and focused more on delayed gratification, my mental health has only gotten better. Has it been easy? Not at all. But I turn up every single day with the mindset that I am going to fight cheap dopamine. And I'm not trying to say all this to be a flex to show how good my routine is compared to other people, But when I think about what I want to achieve in life and the kind of person I need to be to achieve these things, there's no room for cheap dopamine. Am I saying that people should feel bad about themselves if they do any of the habits that I just mentioned? No, people can do whatever they want in their life. However, if someone watching this video is at a point in their life where they feel like their mental health could be better, then I implore you to just think about the habits that you do throughout the day and think about, okay, does this serve me? Does it not serve me? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? And if it's unhealthy, am I making up reasons for why I need to do this thing? Because I think one of the most underrated skills in modern society is looking at all this cheap dopamine, putting boundaries up between you and the cheap dopamine. Will it be difficult? Yes. Will people even try to alienate you or take the mick out of you because you're doing this? Probably. But I can almost guarantee that it will be worth it in the end. If you enjoyed this video, then you might also enjoy the video I did here, where I talk about the biggest factors I think that can improve your confidence. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there. Adios amigos.